What is going on, wonderful people? It's Medicosis Perfectionalis, where medicine makes perfect sense. Welcome to my embryology playlist. Embryology is a topic that drives most students nuts. But fear no more, cause medicosis came for the rescue. Look at this male gamete winking at you. It got some riz. Click the like button, click the subscribe button, and let's get started, pun intended. Aristotle said, "He who sees things from their beginning will have the finest view of them." Preach the word, brother, because today we have a bunch of high IQ douche canoes wandering around the university asking, "Why are we even studying this?" Kiss my placenta. Do you want to know why? The condition known as vectoral association affects your vertebrae, your heart, your kidneys, but not your nervous system and not your gastric epithelium. Embryology can explain why. Ever wondered why the condition known as Pierre-Robin sequence is going to affect the palate, the tongue, the chin, but not the larynx? Embryology has an answer for you. Do you want to know why some twins share one placenta, whereas other twins have separate placentae? That's why we learn embryology. Ever wondered why multiple sclerosis can affect the optic nerve and turn the patient blind, but Guillain-Barré does not? Well, if you master the embryology of the eye, there will be no mystery as to why. That was beautiful. According to Durant, Hippocrates had given a fine example of experimental methods by breaking a hen's eggs at various stages of incubation and had applied the results of these studies in his treatise on the origin of the child. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're studying the origin of the child. So get your notebook ready because I'm about to take you to class. Today is just an introduction to embryology. If you want the full discussion, I have 2 videos for you in my embryology playlist. Part 1 discusses general embryology. It's called Quick Review. And Part 2 is for special embryology, i.e. the development of the heart, the lungs, the gastrointestinal system, the nervous system, etc. And this is titled Ultimate Review. And because most students wake up just 2 days before the final exam, I have a series of review lectures in my anatomy playlist that will help you learn quickly the anatomy of the head and neck, upper extremities, lower extremities, anatomy of the thorax, the abdomen, the pelvis and perineum, neuroanatomy, and even embryology. See my anatomy playlist. Each topic or region in anatomy is covered on 3 videos. Part 1 is Quick Review, Part 2 is Ultimate Review, and Part 3 is Clinically Oriented. And we did the same thing in neuroanatomy as well. So there is Neuroanatomy Part 1, which is Quick Review, Neuroanatomy Part 2, which is Ultimate Review, and Part 3, which is Clinically Oriented Neuroanatomy. And the same applies to embryology on 3 separate videos. So, in less than 30 videos, you will know more anatomy than most doctors. In today's introduction to embryology, we shall talk about the male reproductive system versus the female reproductive system, mitosis versus meiosis, spermatogenesis versus oogenesis, the process of fertilization and implantation. And please remember that in week 2 of intrauterine life, you were just made of 2 layers, the bilaminar embryo. But after 3 weeks, you are 3 layers, the trilaminar embryo. These 3 layers are the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm. Let's start embryology with the basic non-negotiables. Mistakes in the basics are not allowed. The first non-negotiable is the yolk sac. What do you think the yolk sac does? Well, the yolk sac is called yolk sac because it's a sac filled with yolk and therefore it's nourishing for the baby. Oh, shut up. In humans, the yolk sac does not contain any yolk and it does not serve nutritious purposes. You are not a chick. Grow up. So if it does not contain any yolk, then what's the function of the yolk sac in humans then? We have 5 functions or derivatives of the yolk sac in humans. Number 1, the primitive gut. Number 2, the allantois. Number 3, primordial germ cells. In females, they are called oogonia. In males, they are called spermatogonia. Why do we call them germ cells? Because they divide quickly, like crazy, like germs. Number 4, tell me, as an adult, where do your blood cells come from? Like red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. The answer is they come from the bone marrow. However, early in your embryological development, your blood came from the yolk sac. Number 5, the technical term for the yolk is vitellus or vitelline. So the vitelline vessels, which will form some of the embryonic vessels, are derived from the yolk sac. So don't ever forget the 5 derivatives of the yolk sac in human. None of them has anything to do with yolk. The second basic non-negotiable fact is to know the difference between the bilaminar embryo and the trilaminar embryo. The bilaminar embryonic disc happens within the 2nd week. How about the trilaminar? It happens in the 3rd week of embryological development. What are the 2 layers of the bilaminar embryonic disc? One of them is called the epiblast, and the other one is called the hypoblast. So epiblast and hypoblast are the 2 layers of the bilaminar embryo. Epiblast is ectodermal. Hypoblast is endodermal. Where is the mesoderm then? The mesoderm has not appeared yet. When the mesoderm starts to appear, now it's trilaminar. Now the embryo has an ectoderm. Now the embryo has an endoderm, but that's not new. We know that from before, because the epiblast is ectoderm and the hypoblast is endoderm. The 3rd layer, the brand new layer, is the mesoderm. And here I'm talking about the mesoderm that's inside the embryo, or the intra-embryonic mesoderm. What does the word meso mean? Meso means in the middle, as in mesencephalon. Do you remember your midbrain? Midbrain is mesencephalon because in the middle. It's between the forebrain and the hindbrain. Similarly, mesoderm is called meso because it's in the middle. It's between the endoderm and the ectoderm. The word endo means on the inside. This is going to give you your guts. And the word ecto means on the outside. This is going to give you the epidermis of your skin. There are 2 types of mesoderm. There's mesoderm that's part of the embryo, called intraembryonic mesoderm, and mesoderm that's not part of the embryo itself. So we call that extraembryonic mesoderm. Which one of the 2 develops earlier? The extraembryonic mesoderm shows up before the intraembryonic mesoderm. The extraembryonic mesoderm will be divided into 2 types, whereas the intraembryonic mesoderm will be divided into 3 categories. The 2 categories of the extraembryonic mesoderm are the somatic layer and splanchnic layer. Somatic is parietal, splanchnic is visceral. So we can call the somatic layer somatopleuric and the visceral layer splanchnopluric. If you've watched my neuroanatomy playlist, you'll remember that the word visceral is synonymous with splanchnic, which is synonymous with autonomic. The extraembryonic mesoderm's parietal layer is in contact with the ectoderm, but the visceral layer that's near your guts, it's more visceral. So it's in contact with the endoderm. In the meantime, intraembryonic mesoderm is divided into 3 types. Paraaxial mesoderm, intermediate mesoderm, and lateral plate mesoderm. The lateral plate is lateral, the paraaxial is medial, and the intermediate, well, is in between. If you wish to download these doozy colorful notes, go to medicosisperfectionalis.com. I help you learn, understand, and pass exams. If you want me to personally tutor you, please reach out to me on my website. You need to understand the lingo of embryology. When something ends in "-cele" or "-celum", it means cavity. You can write "-celum" like this, or you can write it like this, but make sure that these are not 2 letters, but 1 combined letter. This came from Old English, which came from Latin. But please do not write these 2 letters separately because it drives me nuts. You either write it this way or that way. All of this means a cavity. How about vitellus or vitelline or vitello? It means the yolk of the egg. So later you will learn that the yolk sac is connected to your gut via the vitello-intestinal duct or the vitelline duct. Vitello means facing the egg yolk. Intestinal mean facing the gut. Next, the notochord. It literally means the cord of the back. How many backs do you have? You only have 1 back in the midline. And that's why you only have 1 notochord in the midline. This is the axis of your body during embryological development. And just like the car needs an axle to guide its movement, your body needed a notochord to guide its growth and division along your back. Next, placenta literally means flat cake. It looks like a cake, it behaves like a cake. You can't have your cake and eat it too, because once you eat it, it ceases to exist. Similarly, if there is a molecule of oxygen in the placenta, it's either going to your mother or to the baby. If it goes to the baby, it's not going to the mother. If it goes to the mother, it does not go to the baby. The placenta has a fetal part and a maternal part. The maternal part is the Decidua basalis, which is part of the endometrium of the mother's uterus. The fetal part of the placenta is called Chorion frondosum. The way I remembered is that frondosum is fetal. Next, almost everything in embryology is 3. The trilaminar embryo is 3. Endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. You have 3 parts of your gut: foregut, midgut, and hindgut, supplied by the celiac trunk, superior mesenteric artery, and inferior mesenteric artery, respectively. You have 3 types of chorionic villi. In the beginning, they were primary. Then they matured, becoming secondary. And then they matured even more, becoming tertiary. And these are the ones that you will encounter in the mature, functioning placenta. And just like the chorionic villi passed through 3 stages, the yolk sac passes through 3 stages as well. There is the primary yolk sac, secondary yolk sac, and definitive yolk sac. What are the 5 functions of the yolk sac again? It forms the primitive gut, the allantois, the primordial germ cells, hematopoiesis, and vitelline vessels. Next, the intraembryonic coelom or cavity will give you the famous 3 Ps, the famous 3 serosal membranes or serosal sacs: the pleura, the pericardium, and the peritoneum. Thorax, abdomen. These are lined by epithelium called mesothelium. Inflammation of the serosal membranes is called serositis. So pleurisy, pericarditis, or peritonitis can be referred to as serositis. What does the word coelom mean? It means cavity. See what happens when you organize your thoughts? The world becomes your oyster. That's why even senior anatomy professors call me daddy. Next, please do not confuse the gonads with the gametes. The gonads are ovaries in females, testicles in males, but the gametes are the cells produced by the gonads. The ovaries will make ova, and the testes will make sperms. Ova and sperms are gametes, but ovaries and testicles are gonads. How do we make ova? How do we make sperms? Through meiosis and not mitosis. Have you ever wondered where we got these symbols from? The legend has it that this female symbol resembles a mirror. My poor patient has lupus. It's a malar rash, butterfly rash, which involves the nose and the cheeks, but spares the nasolabial folds. As for the male symbol, according to legend, this is where it came from. Next, another common mistake that students make is that they say, oh, the sperm meets the ovum. That's a bunch of nonsense. That's a load of bilge water. What actually happens is that the sperm meets the secondary oocyte. The sperm never met an ovum, ever. The sperm meets the secondary oocyte that has been arrested and did not complete its meiotic division or meiosis. So it's not an ovum yet. But once the sperm goes deep inside the secondary oocyte, it will complete its meiotic division and change from a secondary oocyte to an ovum. But this only happens after the sperm goes in. The ovum is always X. The sperm could be X or could be Y. If an X sperm meets an X ovum, or I should say secondary oocyte, you get XX, which is a female. But if Y meets X, you get XY, that's a male. When the sperm meets the secondary oocyte, fertilization happens, the ovum matures, and now we have a zygote. The male gamete or sperm has 23 chromosomes. The female gamete has 23 chromosomes. Combine them together, you get one zygote, which is 2 plus 2 is 4, 3 plus 3 is 6. 46 chromosome is the zygote. Then, by a series of mitotic divisions, not meiotic anymore, but mitotic, this is mitosis, the zygote will grow into an embryo. And the embryo will become a fetus. And once the fetus is born, it's called a neonate, and then an infant. So from fertilization to 8 weeks, during gestation, during pregnancy, that's an embryo. From 8 weeks until birth, it's called a fetus. Once it's born, it's an infant. So let's start the topics. Next, we'll talk about male versus female. Okay, what's the primary sex organ or the gonad in males? It's the testis. How about in females? It's the ovary. If the embryo has the SRY gene present, congratulations, this embryo will become a male and will develop a testis. If this embryo does not have an SRY gene, congratulations, the embryo will become a female and will form an ovary instead of a testis. So, if the SRY gene did not show up, that's a female. However, if the SRY gene decided to show up, that's a male. The plural of testis is testes, the plural of ovary is ovaries. These are the primary sex organs, or the gonads. Next, we have secondary internal sex organs, also known as accessory organs, or the internal genitalia. Not to be confused with the external genitalia. These internal genitalia include, in males, we have a bunch of ducts and a bunch of glands. The ducts are the epididymis, the vas deferens, also known as ductus deferens, and ejaculatory duct. The glands are the prostate gland, the seminal vesicles, and the bulbourethral glands of Cooper. In females, we have the oviduct, also known as the uterine tube, also known as the fallopian tube. We have the uterus, this is very internal, and we have Bartholin glands and Skene's glands. Bartholin glands are also known as the greater vestibular glands. On the other hand, Skene's glands are otherwise known as the lesser vestibular glands. Next, the organ of copulation. In males, it's the penis. In females, it's the vagina. Instead of internal genitalia, we're going to talk about external genitalia. In the male, it's the scrotum and the penis. In female, it's the clitoris and the labia. 2 labia majora and 2 labia minora. The clitoris is analogous to the penis, and the labia majora are analogous to the scrotum. Next, secondary sex characteristics, not organs, characteristics. So, in males, hair, low-pitched voice, which means low frequency, and since the speed of sound in air is going to be constant for human voice, so therefore, if I have low frequency, it means that I have high wavelength. Increased bone and muscle mass, that's what testosterone does. The secondary sex characteristics in females are thalarchy, menarche, pubarchy, adrenarchy. Thalarchy is growing of breasts. Menarche, beginning of menses. Pubarchy, pubic hair. Adrenarche is not peculiar to females. It happens in females and males, and this is where the adrenal gland starts to secrete adrenal androgens. Next, the gametes, or the sex cells. The primordial germ cells in males are the spermatogonia. In females, they are the oogonia. And then the spermatogonia will give us spermatocytes, or sperms, while the oogonia will give us oocytes, or ova. In this order: primary oocyte, secondary oocyte, and then ova. Embryologically speaking, many male organs came from the mesonephric or the Wolffian ducts, but the female organs came from the paramesonephric or the Mullerian ducts. How do I remember it? When you think of a wolf, which is a breed of dogs, you think usually of a male dog. So Wolffian is male, but Mullerian is female. Next, we'll talk about the male. Can you please pause and label all of these structures? Number 1 is the scrotum, 2 is the testis, 3 seminiferous tubules in the testis, 4 is the epididymis, 5 is the ductus deferens or the vas deferens. This vas deferens will combine with 8, which is the seminal vesicle and its duct. And now the ductus deferens with the duct of the seminal vesicle will give us a common ejaculatory duct, which will open into the prostatic part of the urethra. This is the prostate gland, which is 10. All of this is the male urethra. To learn about the different parts of the male urethra, please refer to my anatomy video on the pelvis and perineum. 12 is the penis, 3 is the glans penis. This is the urinary bladder, and these are the ureters. Don't forget that urine usually contains a bunch of sperms. Conversely, seminal fluid usually contains a few drops of urine, because the urethra is a common passage. Let's talk about the male gonad, which is the testis. Structure: it has 2 famous types of cells. The main ones are the seminiferous tubules, these circles. Between the circles, in the interstitial space between these tubules, we have the interstitial cells of Leydig, also known as Leydig cells. What's the function of these seminiferous tubules? They have germinal epithelial cells, which will give us the primordial germ cells, the spermatogonia, for spermatogenesis. The seminiferous tubule also have another type of cell, which is Sertoli cell. Sertoli cell has many functions. It helps spermatogenesis, and it provides the blood-testis barrier to protect the testis from the toxins outside. Not just the toxin, but many things. And that's why, for example, if you're trying to treat a male patient who has leukemia, and you suspect that the leukemia might have spread to the testis, then you will have to give the chemotherapy directly into the testis. You cannot just rely on the chemotherapeutic agent floating in the blood to reach the testis, because the testis will protect itself through its blood-testis barrier, which is formed by the Sertoli cell. This blood-testis barrier is very important because sperms have 23 chromosomes, but most of your body cells have 46 chromosomes. So, to the male body, the sperm is a foreign entity. Your immune system has never seen a cell with 23 chromosomes. That's weird, because the sperm lives inside the testis. The sperm does not touch your blood. However, if this blood-testis barrier is broken, let's say due to trauma, surgery, or whatever, these sperms will escape from the testis to your blood, triggering your immune system because they look weird. They have 23 chromosomes instead of the normal 46 chromosomes. So your immune system will kill that sperm that escaped and then come and destroy the entire testis. Or I should say, both testes. And that's why every alpha male should be grateful for his Sertoli cell. These are the functions of the seminiferous tubules. How about the function of the interstitial cells of Leydig? They secrete testosterone. And then you can take that testosterone and convert it to the more potent dihydrotestosterone by a famous enzyme known as the 5-alpha reductase, which reduces testosterone into the more potent dihydrotestosterone. It is so potent indeed that it will grow your prostate gland over time, and it will give you male pattern alopecia. You will be as bold as an American eagle. The process of making sperms or spermatogenesis requires a cool temperature. Your body temperature of about 37 degrees Celsius is too much for your testis. And that's why the testis has to be hanging outside of your body in a special sac called the scrotum. It's away from the body to protect it from the extra heat. It's kept cool at about 32 degrees Celsius instead of 37 degrees Celsius because it's located outside of the abdominal cavity, it's located in the scrotum, and because of countercurrent exchange of heat, because it has vessels going down, vessels going up, and this gives you countercurrent exchange. Does anyone remember the loop of Henle? Yeah, it was a countercurrent multiplier. And that's why if you are a male, then wearing very tight undergarments, whether they are from Hanes, Fruit of the Loom, or cochineal, or whatever you're wearing, is detrimental for spermatogenesis. That's not good for your testicles. If you have chronic fever for whatever reason, that's not good for your spermatogenesis. Bathing in hot water frequently, not good for spermatogenesis. Speaking of testes, here's a crazy story. In ancient Greece, before my boy Aristotle, many people falsely believed that the right testis is gonna give you a male embryo, whereas the left testis will give us a female embryo. But Aristotle put them to shame. He found a volunteer, a male subject, and then tied his right testis. Yet this individual was able to have children, both male and female, even with his right testis tied, which means that one testis can give us males and females. So in order to disprove this myth, Aristotle had to tie the testis of a living human being. I mean, the balls on this Greek philosopher. Next, we'll talk about the male organ of copulation. It has 2 corpora cavernosa, dorsally, and 1 corpus spongiosum, ventrally. This is dorsal, this is ventral. To put the male organ in the anatomical position, it has to be in the erect position. So this is dorsal, this is ventral. Dorsally, you have 2 corpora cavernosa. What does corpus mean? Corpus means body. Cavern, what's a cavern? A large cave, because it's a large cave filled with blood. You have 2 caves filled with blood, and that's what gives erection. But the corpus spongiosum is spongy. It's always spongy, it's always soft, even during erection. The undersurface of the penis remains relatively soft, because it does not have caverns that fill with blood. What's in the corpus spongiosum? The urethra, which is a common path for urine and seminal fluid. To learn more about the muscles that aid in ejaculation, please refer to my video on anatomy of the pelvis and perineum. Let's review autonomic nervous system. Remember that parasympathetic is to point, which is erection, but sympathetic is to shoot, that's ejaculation. The P goes with the P and the S goes with the S. And just to finish the mnemonic, the P is parasympathetic, which points, that's erection, and the parasympathetic in this area is supplied by the pelvic nerves or pelvic splanchnic nerves, which are S2, 3, 4. Keep the penis off the floor. Each sperm has 23 chromosomes. It has half of the number of the chromosomes that we find in the somatic cell. And because it's half, we say it's haploid and not diploid. The sperm is going to leave the testis, epididymis, vas deferens, and then will go to the ejaculatory duct, to the urethra, and then will be ejaculated outside of the body. Where is the sperm going? It's going to the female genital tract, vagina, and then cervix, and then uterus, and then fallopian tube, and then it's gonna meet the ovum, the secondary oocyte, in the widest area of the fallopian tube, which is the ampulla. Not the narrowest area, but the widest area of the fallopian tube. The legend has it that the sperm asked the ovum, "Where do you want to make love? Do you want to make love in the privacy of our own bedroom?" The ovum replied, "No. I want to make love in Times Square, in the city center, in the widest area of the city." This is how to create memories. #fertilization. Now please pause the video and try to label all of these structures. This is the right ovary, this is the left ovary, and then the fallopian tube, or the oviduct, or the uterine tube, has fimbriae, infundibulum, ampulla, isthmus, and then the uterine part, or the intramural part. This is the uterus. This is the fundus of the uterus. This is the cervix of the uterus. As for the wall of the uterus, it's made of 3 layers: endometrium, myometrium, perimetrium. Here's a quiz for you. How many cervix do you have? How many cervices do you have? Well, the answer is, if you're a female, you have 2 cervices. If you're a male, you only have 1 cervix. What? What are you talking about? Well, the female has 2 cervices, one in the uterus and one in the neck. The neck is a cervix. The male has only 1 cervix, which is his neck. And that's why the word cervical could be referring to your neck or could be referring to the cervix of the uterus. Then there's the vagina or the vaginal canal, and this is the opening or the introitus, which opens into the vulva. The area here is the vestibule, and that's why we have greater and lesser vestibular glands. Quick notes. Infections can spread upward, so vaginitis, cervicitis, uteritis, salpingitis. And then this is related to the peritoneum, so infection can spread, peritonitis. Did you know that normally speaking, when ovulation happens, the ovum leaves the ovary, pierces the peritoneum, and then gets engulfed and catched by the fimbriae of the fallopian tube? So yeah, there is peritoneum here. So infection can spread, causing peritonitis. Next, when the sperm meets the secondary oocyte and it becomes ovum and fertilization happens, where does the embryo land? It should normally land in the uterus, closer to the fundus than the cervix, about in this area right here. This is the normal site of implantation. However, abnormal sites of implantation can happen in ectopic pregnancy. The most common site of ectopic pregnancy is the fallopian tube itself. Another fact to keep in mind is that if I have fibrosis in the tube, in the fallopian tubes, this is a common cause of infertility in females. One possible cause of this is pelvic inflammatory disease. #chlamydia, #gonorrhea. Profound too is the myth of Isis, the Great Mother. She was not only the loyal sister and wife of Osiris, in a sense, she was greater than he, for like women in general, she had conquered death through love. Nor was she merely the black soil of the delta, fertilized by the touch of Osiris Nile, and making all Egypt rich with her fecundity. If you want to learn more about fecundity versus fertility, please refer to my obstetrics and gynecology playlist. Next, during lovemaking or copulation or coitus or intercourse or hanky-panky, oxytocin hormone gets released. Who made it? The hypothalamus did. Who stored it? The posterior pituitary did. Who secreted it into the blood? The posterior pituitary did. What does it do? It has 3 main functions. During coitus, it helps the uterus contract, and some argue that it helps the epididymis contract as well. And this helps guide the sperm into the ovum, or you should say the secondary oocyte, in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. Second function, during labor, it also contracts the uterus, and this helps push the baby out. So it can pull the sperm in or push the baby out. Third, during breastfeeding, oxytocin help with milk letdown or milk ejection from the breast to the baby's mouth. Because oxytocin is a hero of contraction. Why is this? Because oxytocin's receptor is GQ coupled receptor. And when you're GQ coupled, you play with calcium. And calcium is the hero of contraction. I'm gonna contract the smooth muscles of the myometrium of the uterus. I'm also gonna contract the myoepithelial cells around the acini or the alveoli of the breast to empty the milk out. See, medicine makes so much sense once you understand what the French toast you're talking about. Next, what are the stimuli for oxytocin release? Stimulation of the nipple, dilation of the cervix, or stimulation of the genitalia. Even hugging can release oxytocin. Fertilization is when the sperm meets the secondary oocyte. And then XX, that's a female, XY, that's a male. 23 chromosomes here, 23 chromosomes there, 46 chromosome here. You have 44 somatic chromosome and 2 sex chromosomes. 44 somatic plus 2 sex equals 46 total chromosomes in every cell of your body except ova or sperms. Next, let's talk about mitosis versus meiosis. If I start with a cell that is 46 chromosome, in mitosis, I'm gonna get 2 daughter cells, each one is 46 chromosomes. However, in meiosis, that's not the case. If you start with 46, you're gonna get something less. You're gonna get 23. This is mitosis. If you start with a cell that's 46 chromosome, we'll call this 2N or diploid, you're gonna end up with 2 identical daughter cells. Each one of them is 2N or 46 chromosome or diploid. But in meiosis, if you start with one parent cell, which is 2N, 46 chromosome, diploid, it will give you non-identical daughter cell. And each one of them is N instead of 2N. We call this haploid. Haplo means half. Mitosis occurs in somatic cells. For example, the cells of your skin dividing. But meiosis occurs in sex cells, gametes, spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Mitosis is not involved in sexual reproduction, but meiosis is. The end result of mitosis is 2 diploid cells, but the end result of meiosis is 4 haploid cells. Moreover, mitosis has 1 round of division. However, meiosis has 2 rounds of divisions, so we call them meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. Meiosis 1 is where the actual reduction takes place. You started with diploid and you end up with haploid. So this is reduction division. However, meiosis 2 is similar but not identical to mitosis because you started with haploid and you're going to give me haploid. So what I started with, I'm going to give you the same thing. It's similar to mitosis but not identical. So the first round is called reduction division because I'm being reduced, but the second round is called equational division from equal because you started with N and you ended up with N. Since we're talking about gametogenesis, we're going to focus on meiosis. This is meiosis 1. This is meiosis 2. Meiosis 1 has prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Meiosis 2 has the same. This is prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. All of this takes number 1, this takes number 2, because this is the first round of division, this is the second round of division. Why is meiosis so important? Genetic diversity. Look around you. There are more than 8 billion people on planet Earth. Almost none of them are identical, with the exception of identical twins. Next, we shall talk about spermatogenesis and oogenesis, to make the male gametes and the female gametes respectively. Spermatogenesis starts by a spermatogonium, whereas oogenesis starts with an oogonium. Here's the spermatogonium. It is diploid or diploid. It has 46 chromosomes. And because it has 46 chromosomes, there is no reason for it to be protected from your immune system. However, once it starts the meiotic division, it will need to protect itself from your immune system by passing through the tight junction made by the Sertoli cells. And now we have a primary spermatocyte. It still has 46 chromosomes, but it has 4 chromatids instead of 2. You can watch my biology playlist to know more about chromatids. Then the primary spermatocyte will divide into 2 secondary spermatocytes. Each one of them has only 23 chromosomes, and that's the reduction. This is the first round of meiosis. In the second round of meiosis, Each secondary spermatocyte will give you 2 sperms. Each sperm has 23 chromosomes. When does spermatogenesis actually begin? It begins in puberty. Where does it happen? Inside the testis. This is a very rapidly dividing process, and that's why it's vulnerable to injury by radiation exposure or exposure to chemotherapeutics. And that's why chemotherapy or radiation therapy can cause infertility in males and in females, because these cells divide very quickly, and that's why we call them germ cells. Next, oogenesis. It starts by an oogonium, which will become primary oocyte. Then each primary oocyte will give me secondary oocyte. Each secondary oocyte will give me ovum and a polar body. So, in males, the end result of spermatogenesis gave me 4 sperms. One spermatogonia will give me 4 sperms. But one oogonium will give me only 1 ovum and 3 polar bodies. This is how it actually happens. You start with oogonium and then primary oocyte. And then as the primary oocyte becomes secondary oocyte, it releases the first polar body. And as the secondary oocyte is becoming an ovum, it releases another polar body. And the first polar body will give you 2. So at the end of the day, there is 1 mature ovum and 3 polar bodies per primary oocyte, per oogonium. A new baby girl is born. She's a newborn. If we take a sample from one of her ovaries, what will we see? Oh, we'll see ovum. Shut up. You will never see an ovum. You will see the primary oocyte and the oogonium. That's it. You will never see secondary oocytes, and you will never see ova in the ovary of a female newborn. Because before puberty, the oogonium will give us primary oocyte and will stop here. We'll stop here from the 5th month of gestation all the way up to puberty. Still, we are primary oocyte. This first arrest is in prophase 1, which is the prophase of the first meiosis division. Then puberty begins. So the primary oocyte is going to give us the secondary oocyte. The secondary oocyte will be arrested and will wait until fertilization happens. The second arrest is in metaphase 2, which is metaphase of meiosis 2. So the 2 arrests are in prophase 1 and metaphase 2. Prophase 1 and metaphase 2. And this second arrest will only end if fertilization takes place. Once the sperm meets the secondary oocyte, then the secondary oocyte can mature and become an ovum, releasing the polar body. But if fertilization did not take place, then it's the secondary oocyte that falls out during menstruation. Let's put spermatogenesis and oogenesis side by side. Which one is spermatogenesis? Which one is oogenesis? Well, let's look at this. Here you have 3 polar bodies and 1 ovum, so this is oogenesis. But here you have 4 sperms or spermatids, then this is spermatogenesis. Next, fertilization. When the sperm meets the secondary oocyte, sperm goes up, meets the secondary oocyte in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. Together they will form a zygote. The sperm is the male gamete, and the oocyte or the ovum is the female gamete. If you want to learn about the role of FSH, LH, and GnRH in reproductive physiology, please refer to my physiology playlist. If you want to learn about the menstrual cycle, please refer to my physiology playlist. The structure of the sperm. It has a head, it has a neck, it has a middle piece, it has a tail. The middle piece with the M has a mitochondrion with an M because the sperm needs energy in order to beat its tail and swim. The favorite source of energy for the sperm is fructose. When the sperm was still immature, it was immobile. Immature, immobile. However, as it matured, it became mobile, and this usually happens in the epididymis. So the M goes with the M, goes with the M. The mature sperm is mobile, and it matures in the epididymis, and the process called spermiation. Next, the structure of the oocyte or the ovum. You have granulosa cells on the inside, and you have theca cells on the outside. Granulosa cells secrete estrogen, whereas theca cells secrete androgen. And you need that androgen to make that estrogen by a process called aromatization, catalyzed by an enzyme called aromatase. This is the structure of the ovum. It has a nucleus which contains 23 chromosomes, haploid. It has a cytoplasm with granules. It has a cell membrane like any cell. And it has the radiating crown shining around it, the corona radiata. What else has corona radiata? the sun during solar eclipse, your brain has corona radiata, and your heart does not have corona but has coronary arteries, which surround your heart like a crown. Isn't that beautiful? Yes, it is. Until they get blocked, then it's painful. The sperm is going to meet the secondary oocyte, and the steps of fertilization are 5. Capacitation, acrosomal reaction, polyspermy block, completion of meiosis II, where the secondary oocyte becomes a mature ovum, and to make a zygote. Step number 1, capacitation. What does that mean? Acquiring a capacity to fertilize. Remember that the sperm matures partly in the epididymis and partly by secretions from the female genital tract, such as the uterus. This destabilizes the plasma membrane of the sperm, making the tip of the sperm sharp and ready to go deep inside. This is called the acrosomal reaction. Moreover, calcium permeability increases. Calcium is the hero of contraction, which increases the strength and the speed of the beating of the flagellum of the sperm until the sperm reaches its full capacity. Hashtag capacitation. Next is the acrosomal reaction. In order for fertilization to take place, the sperm and the oocyte need to recognize one another. Why? To ensure same species fertilization, so that you do not end up with a child that is half human and half goat. Unless your child is Lionel Messi, in which case the acrosomal reaction has left the chat. How does the acrosomal reaction take place? When the sperm reaches the zona pellucida, which is this indigo or light blue color, it's called zona pellucida because it's very clear. When the sperm reaches the zona pellucida, actin filaments will bind something called ZP3, which is a protein in the zona pellucida. Z for zona, P for pellucida. This will release hydrolytic enzyme from the sperm's acrosome. Acro means extremity or the tip. And this will digest the zona pellucida so that the sperm can go deep inside. However, the sperm does not take its middle piece with it, and it does not take its tail with it. Only the head is gonna go in. And that's why your daddy's mitochondria did not contribute to your mitochondrion. Only your mother's mitochondrion contributed to the zygote's mitochondrion. So, if I am born with a mitochondrial disease, whose mitochondrion is this? It's mommy's mitochondrion, because daddy left his mitochondrion outside. He did not leave his shoes outside, but he did leave the mitochondrion outside. Step number 3 in fertilization is polyspermy block. Here's the thing. Do you want your offspring to be like you, diploid, or do you want your offspring to be different? Of course, we want to be normal human, 2N, diploid, 46 chromosomes. And therefore, once the first sperm has entered, we should block any other sperm from entering. And this is called polyspermy block. Block the entry of many sperms. There is a fast block and there is a slow block. Fast block happens by depolarization, thank you sodium. Slow block happens via calcium. Calcium is always slower than sodium because calcium channels are slower than sodium channels. Just like calcium is the hero of contraction, it's also the hero of cortical reaction, which causes exocytosis of cortical granules, which were here in the secondary oocyte, and they will make the zona pellucida impenetrable to any other sperm. Moreover, the exocytosis will cut the link between the cell membrane and the zona pellucida, making it virtually impossible for another sperm to enter. You only need one sperm and one secondary oocyte. That's it. Extra sperms are not welcome. Hashtag polyspermy block. And this takes the phrase, quote, she blocked me, unquote, to a whole other level. Step number 4 is the maturation of the secondary oocyte into a mature ovum and release of the arrest of metaphase 2. We're gonna finish meiosis 2 and become a mature ovum. This only happens after fertilization. Step number 5 is zygote formation. One sperm and one secondary oocyte, we can call it ovum now, will equal one zygote. The zygote is diploid with 46 chromosomes. And then, by a series of mitotic divisions known as cleavage, because one cell will be cleaved into 2, and then to 4, to 8, to 16, etc., you will have an embryo. After the embryo, you'll have a fetus via mitotic division, and then mitotic. What's the most common symptom of pregnancy? It's amenorrhea. It's not pain, it's not nausea, it's not soft tissue swelling, but it's amenorrhea. This is the most common and the most accurate symptom to tell the doctor that the lady is pregnant. When the sperm goes deep inside, you have a male pronucleus and a female pronucleus. They will unite together to give you the nucleus of the zygote. Don't forget that polar bodies are still here and the polar body will disappear gradually. And this is one nucleus for the zygote. Then the zygote will divide again until it gets implanted into the uterus. Who keeps the embryo implanted into the uterus? Answer: a bunch of hormones. Especially progesterone with the help of some estrogen. Where did progesterone come from? Ovary. How about estrogen? From the ovary. How did the ovary make estrogen and progesterone? By an order from the anterior pituitary. Because the anterior pituitary releases FSH and LH to tell the ovary to make estrogen and progesterone. How did the anterior pituitary release FSH and LH? By an order from the hypothalamus, which gives GnRH to the anterior pituitary to tell the anterior pituitary to make FSH and LH to tell the ovary to make estrogen and progesterone. So hypothalamus is going to make GnRH to tell the anterior pituitary to make FSH and LH, collectively known as gonadotropin, and GnRH is gonadotropin releasing hormone, and then the gonadotropins, FSH and LH, will tell the ovary to make estrogen and progesterone. The progesterone will help maintain and sustain the endometrium of the uterus of the mother. How does progesterone do that? By increasing the diameter of blood vessels in the endometrium and improving the blood flow to the uterus and increasing the secretion of the glands of the uterus, leading to a strong, more robust, and more sustained and more maintained endometrium. Thank you, progesterone. And that's why progesterone is aptly named. It's literally pro-gestation. It is pro-pregnancy. This slide is one of the most important slides in the entire lecture. It talks about the difference between fertilization not happening versus fertilization happening. If fertilization does not take place, then the corpus luteum, which is in the ovary, is going to degenerate in the ovary and become corpus albicans. It changes from the yellow body to the white body. What's the function of the corpus luteum? May it rest in peace. Well, it's used to secrete estrogen and progesterone, but after it degenerates, #apoptosis, estrogen and progesterone will decline. And if the function of progesterone, may it rest in peace, was to maintain the endometrium, then a sudden fall of progesterone will disrupt the endometrium. So the endometrium will slough off and the endometrium will fall, taking the unfertilized secondary oocyte with it to outside of the body, and this is called menstrual bleeding. But what if fertilization took place? Then the secondary oocyte is going to become an ovum. Ovum is fertilized, now it's a zygote. It's going to grow, and divide, and then the blastocyst will get implanted into the uterus. However, the corpus luteum in the ovary will not regenerate, but it will persist, and it will secrete all kinds of progesterone and estrogen. Progesterone maintains and sustains the endometrium of the uterus, so the endometrium will not slough off, it will not fall, and there will be no menstrual bleeding. Instead, the endometrium is maintained and sustained. The endometrium will grow, and the endometrium after implantation changes its name by a verbal sleight of hand into the Decidua. And the corpus luteum will keep dishing out progesterone and estrogen until the placenta takes over. Where did the placenta come from? It came from the trophoblast. So, whenever you hear the word trophoblast or chorion, just remember, we're making placenta. Trophoblast, chorion, placenta. The placenta makes HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, again chorionic because related to the placenta, which will tell the corpus luteum, hey, do not degenerate. We want you. We need you to make progesterone and estrogen. Moreover, the trophoblast secretes human placental lactogen. So we have human chorionic gonadotropin, which is secreted by the trophoblast and the placenta, and we also have human placental lactogen. As long as the placenta is not there, we need to sustain the corpus luteum, but once the placenta fully develops, there is no need for the corpus luteum anymore. To learn more about human chorionic gonadotropin and human placental lactogen, please refer to my obstetrics and gynecology playlist. So fertilization took place, the zygote grows and grows and grows, embryo, fetus, and then after birth it's an infant. Here is one cell, which is the zygote. You can call this day 0 or day 1. No one cares. Then cleavage by mitotic division from 1 cell into 2 cells, and then 4 cells, then 8 cells, then 16 cells. When it's about 12 to 16 cells, we call it the morula. The morula does not have any cavity on the inside, and this occurs about day 3 or day 4. After the morula, you have the blastocyst. And unlike the morula, the blastocyst actually has a cavity inside. It's called the blastocyst cavity or blastocele. Again, cele means cavity. This is the blastocyst that will be implanted into the uterus. More superior than inferior, closer to the fundus than to the cervix, and more posterior than anterior. After this, we should have the bilaminar embryo in the 2nd week. Bilaminar because we have 2 layers, epiblast, which is ectoderm, and hypoblast, which is endoderm. Followed by the trilaminar embryo in the 3rd week. And what are the 3 layers? Endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. Epiblast, that's the ectoderm. Hypoblast, that's the endoderm. And the mesoderm is new. Don't forget, we have an extra-embryonic mesoderm and intra-embryonic mesoderm. Here, I'm referring to the intra-embryonic mesoderm. This is one cell called zygote. And then we have 2 cells. Each one is called the blastomere. Blasto, growth or dividing. Mere means piece. Then you divide more and you have 4 cells, and then you divide more, you have about 12 to 16. That's we call the morula. It has no cavity. This is the 2-cell stage. This is a 4-cell stage. And you divide and you divide and you divide some more. After the morula, you have the blastocyst. This is the blastocyst from the outside. It has about 24 cells or 24 individual blastomeres. But on the inside, it has a cavity. It's called the blastocyst cavity or the blastocele. The outer layer of cell that you see from the outside is called the outer cell mass. That's the trophoblast. The ones on the inside is the inner cell mass, and that's the embryoblast. The actual embryo is derived from the embryoblast, but the placenta, the chorion, is derived from the trophoblast. So the inner cell mass or the embryoblast is going to become you, the actual embryo. The entire organism is from the embryoblast. Whether we're talking endoderm, mesoderm, ectoderm, the whole thing is embryoblast. As for the trophoblast, this will give us the chorion, and the chorion will give us the placenta. There are 2 things that you need to be aware of, the chorion and the amnion. After implantation happens, what's next? Gastrulation. First, implantation. What exactly is being implanted? The blastocyst is being implanted. Where? In the endometrium of the uterus. Which part? Is it more superior or more inferior? Well, it's more superior, closer to the fundus. Is it more anterior or more posterior? It's more posterior. So to sum it up, implantation of the blastocyst takes place in the posterior superior aspect of the endometrium of the uterus near the fundus. Once implantation takes place, the endometrium of the uterus, by a verbal sleight of hand, will change its name into the decidua. How did the blastocyst dig its tentacles into the endometrium? Well, via its outer cell mass, the trophoblast, which will become the chorion, which will dig its tentacles deep into the endometrium, and that's what we call the placenta in the future. How do we connect the baby to the mother? Through the umbilical cord, which is attached to the placenta, and the placenta is attached to the endometrium of the mother. What are the contents of the umbilical cord? We have gelatinous substance, and we have a bunch of umbilical vessels. 2 arteries and 1 vein, which is weird because if you look at your upper extremity, for example, look at your arm. You have 1 artery, but 2 veins. The 1 artery is the brachial artery. The 2 veins are cephalic and basilic. So we usually have 1 artery and 2 venous communicantes. Not here. Here you have the opposite. Here you have 2 arteries and 1 vein. In your arm, the brachial artery carries oxygenated blood, and the veins carry deoxygenated blood in your arm. However, in the umbilical cord, it's the opposite. The arteries carry deoxygenated blood from the baby to the mother, whereas the vein carries oxygenated blood from the mother to the baby. When does implantation happen? Around the 7th day, and is completed by the 12th day. At day 8, I'm being implanted. I am a blastocyst with an outer cell mass, #trophoblast, and an inner cell mass, #embryoblast. The part of the embryo that will be embedded into the endometrium is called the embryonic pole, whereas the one on the opposite side is called the abembryonic pole. Ab means far away, as in abnormal, which means far from normal, or abduct, which is far from adduct. This is mommy's endometrium. Remember that the uterus has endometrium, myometrium, and perimetrium. Once the endometrium encounters the embryo during implantation, it's going to change its name into Decidua. After implantation, we welcome the process of gastrulation. What does gastrulation mean? Gastrulation with a G is generation of distinct layers with a G. There is something pushing and pushing and pushing, and pushing and pushing and pushing, and pushing and pushing and pushing until boom, you have this shape with an amniotic cavity and a yolk sac cavity with an amnion and a chorion. The chorion will become the placenta. The inner cell mass is the embryoblast. It will become the embryo itself. Whereas the outer cell mass is the trophoblast, which will become the chorion, which will become the placenta. The blastocyst cavity, also known as the blastocele, will turn into the cavity of the yolk sac, which in humans does not contain any yolk, but it's going to help you form your primitive gut, your allantois, your primordial germ cells, such as oogonia and spermatogonia. It will help you make blood cells, #hematopoiesis, and it will help you make vitelline vessels, which will form some of the embryonic vessels. This is the blastocyst. This is the cavity of the blastocyst. We call it blastocyst cavity or blastocele. This is the amnion, which contains amniotic fluid. And this is the chorion, which will become the placenta. And the placenta will attach the baby to the mother. And there will be a lovely connection between them called the umbilical cord. This membrane is called the amnion. This is the amniotic fluid in the amniotic cavity. This is the yolk sac cavity. As for this cavity, it's something called extra-embryonic coelom. But I digress. What got implanted again? What got implanted is the blastocyst. After implantation, we're gonna welcome the bilaminar embryo in the second week. Next, if you want to learn about the folding of the trilaminar embryo, watch my video titled Neurulation, which you can find in my embryology playlist. The neural tube appears in the third week. Keep in mind that your nervous system is ectodermal in origin. Whether you're talking about central nervous system or peripheral nervous system, it is ectodermal in origin. Next, the placenta. It's the connection between the mother and the baby. So this is the uterus of the mother. This is the placenta. This is the umbilical cord. This is the embryo or the fetus. Next, here's the placenta, which literally means flat cake because it looks like a flat cake. This is the maternal side. This is the fetal side with the umbilical cord containing jelly and umbilical vessels. You have 2 arteries and 1 vein. 2 umbilical arteries, 1 umbilical vein. Let's follow them. Oh, they are the same vessels that branch within the vellus. The moment you see vessels in the vellus, you can bet the rent money that it's a tertiary vellus in the mature placenta. Between the vellus and the next vellus, there is the intervellus space. As for these vessels, these are the maternal vessels. Please note that the maternal blood and the fetal blood do not mix. So the placenta acts as a barrier. But what if mommy wants to give oxygen to the fetus? Diffusion will happen, but no touching between the mother's vessel and the fetal vessel. The oxygen will diffuse from the mother's vessels through the placenta to the fetal vessels. Carbon dioxide will do the opposite. Again, no touching. This is important because immunologically speaking, the baby is foreign to his mother. So, if we allow the vessels to touch, some cells from the fetus will escape and go to the maternal circulation, triggering the immune system of the mother, and then the mother will attack the baby, immunologically speaking. This part of the endometrium, part of the mother, is the decidua basalis, alright? That's the maternal part, the decidua basalis. How about the fetal part? As we said in the beginning of this lecture, the fetal part is the chorion frondosum. The placenta allows passage of oxygen and nutrients from the mother to the baby, #umbilical vein, and allows passage of carbon dioxide and waste from the baby to the mother, #umbilical arteries. Where did the umbilical arteries come from? They came from the baby's internal iliac arteries. To know more about internal iliac and common iliac arteries, please refer to my video titled Anatomy of the Pelvis and Perineum. Mommy has more oxygen than the baby. The baby has less oxygen. So, down the concentration gradient you go, from high concentration to low concentration, and this is called diffusion, across a semi-permeable membrane. Just like that, from A to B. But when it comes to carbon dioxide and waste, it's the opposite. The baby has more than the mother, so they go from high concentration, from the baby, to low concentration, to the mother. During the intrauterine life, the umbilical cord is vital. And that's why we do not want the umbilical cord to be compressed by anything in the womb, whether it's by the baby's hiney, by the baby's head, etc. And it's really a bad situation when the umbilical cord is compressed right here at the head and is bulging out of the cervix. That is horrible. Do you know what's the name of the condition where the umbilical cord falls off of the uterus and bulges down like this? Tell me the name of that condition in the comments. It's diffusion, diffusion, and more diffusion. Adult humans have one artery and two veins, but embryos have two arteries and one vein. In adults, the systemic arteries carry oxygenated blood, but in the embryo, the umbilical artery carries deoxygenated blood. In an adult, the systemic veins carry deoxygenated blood, but in an embryo, the umbilical vein carries oxygenated blood. However, make no mistake about it. Whether we're talking about adults or embryo, the definition of an artery does not change. An artery is a vessel that takes blood from the heart to another organ. A vein is the opposite. It takes blood from the organ and returns it back to the heart. This definition holds true whether we're talking about adult humans or we're talking about embryos. Now, what if there is a molecule of oxygen in the middle between the maternal surface and the fetal surface? Who's gonna grab this oxygen faster? Is it the mother or the fetus, and why? The answer is, it's the fetus. Recall that the favorite word for the baby is mine, mine, this is mine, this is mine. This oxygen molecule, it is mine. I'm gonna take it from mommy. How did that happen? It happened because the fetus has hemoglobin F that the mother does not have. F stands for fetal hemoglobin. Contrast that with the mother's hemoglobin, which is mostly hemoglobin A for adult, but F is for fetus. What the hemoglobin F of the fetus does is that it shifts the oxygen dissociation curve to the left, increasing the affinity and the binding between the fetal hemoglobin and the molecule of oxygen that was hanging in between. The most generous molecule in biochemistry is 2,3-BPG, 2 and 3-bisphosphoglycerate. Why is it generous? Because it tells the hemoglobin to give oxygen away, give it to someone else. However, the fetal hemoglobin does not bind to the generous 2,3-BPG, and that's why the fetus is not generous. The fetus is greedy. The fetus is gonna steal the oxygen from his mother, which is a good thing because the fetus lungs do not work. The fetus cannot breathe on its own. This is the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. The fetal hemoglobin will shift it to the left in this direction. You move from the black line to the purple line. And this is what fetal hemoglobin does. When you do this, what's going to happen? Well, let's extend the line from here and go up to the original graph. You're going to intersect here. But after you shift it to the left, you're going to intersect here. So tell me again, what happened to the oxygen saturation? The oxygen saturation went from this point to this point. So the oxygen saturation went up. What does that mean? It means it's the saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen went up, which means that at this moment, the hemoglobin is binding more oxygen than before. And this is what hemoglobin F does. It makes the fetus binds more oxygen, taking it away from the mother, which does not have hemoglobin F. Hemoglobin F will shift the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve to the left. And when you shift it to the left, the tissue is left behind, and the oxygen lands on the hemoglobin. No generosity anymore. So when there is a molecule of oxygen between the two, who wins? The fetal hemoglobin wins. The baby wins. And that's one of the reasons the mother during pregnancy has to breathe more than a lady who's not pregnant. Because now mommy is providing herself and her fetus with oxygen. And this is how medicosis integrates anatomy, embryology, histology, physiology, and biochemistry together like it's nobody's business. The functions of the placenta are many. It supplies oxygen and nutrients to the fetus. So the placenta serves a nutritional function and a respiratory function. It also serves an excretory function and immunological function. And the placenta can also secrete melanocyte-stimulating hormone, and that's why during pregnancy, some parts of the mother's skin get darker. For example, the areola gets darker. There is the mask of pregnancy. The linea alba in the abdomen turns into linea nigra. Next, if that was not enough, the placenta has more secretory functions. The placenta can secrete progesterone, because remember that the corpus luteum is now toast. The placenta can also secrete estrogen. The placenta can secrete some human chorionic gonadotropin and human placental lactogen. Some research suggests that the placenta might contain some stem cells that can be harvested and used in order to treat some diseases that might afflict this individual later in life. And now that I think about it, I am so mad at the doctor who delivered me. Where is my placenta? I was born in Egypt back in the day when the dinosaurs walked near the pyramids of Giza. I don't know where my placenta is. It's possible that my doctor gave my placenta to the nurse, who in turn threw it to the stray dogs. And this, my friends, is how humanity got the HIV virus. Just kidding. If you value what I do, help me make more videos by supporting the channel. Go to buymeacoffee.com/medicosis. If you want to learn more about the bilaminar embryo, the trilaminar embryo in detail, neurulation, the three deciduae, the fetal membranes, the amnion, the umbilical cord, the yolk sac, the allantois, and twin pregnancy, watch my video titled Embryology Quick Review, which covers general embryology. To learn about the embryology of the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, the gastrointestinal system, the genitourinary system, and more, watch the video titled Embryology Ultimate Review. Both of these videos are in the embryology playlist. To learn more about the normal maternal changes during pregnancy, the diseases of pregnancy, normal labor, and abnormal labor, download my obstetrics and gynecology course at medicosisperfectionalis.com. It comes with videos, notes, and cases. After mastering embryology and anatomy, it's time to learn about surgery. I have a surgery high yields course on my website medicosisperfectionalis.com. I help you learn, understand, and pass exams. To learn about estrogen, progesterone, prolactin, thyroxine, cortisol, insulin, and more, download my endocrine pharmacology course at medicosisperfectionalis.com. There are more than 700 premium videos available on this channel. When you click the join button and choose the highest tier, please subscribe, hit the bell, smash like, support my channel on Patreon, PayPal, or Venmo. Go to my website to download my courses, notes, and cases, or if you would like me to personally tutor you. Be safe, stay happy, study hard. This is Medicosis Perfectionalis, where medicine, chemistry, math, and physics make perfect sense.